Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today is going to be my full review and discussion of this very attractive Kizer. This is the Kizer Escort, designed by Pinkerton. Maybe you'll even see it called the Kizer Pinkerton Escort. I found it labeled that way at a couple of retailers and I think on eBay as well. This knife has been around for a little while, and at first blush, you know, probably people would look at this and go, Kevin, why haven't you had this knife already? This seems right up your alley. And in many ways it is. You know, it's simple, it's got fairly heavy duty construction, pretty decently thick blade stock, a really nice blade shape. This is really a knife that I am attracted to aesthetically and functionally. But here's the things that put me off. Number one is the coated blade, and number two is the size. This just makes 8 inches, and so, you know, that's kind of on the low end of what I like in an EDC style knife, and so I wasn't highly motivated to buy this one. However, they've been on sale a few different places recently for really aggressive prices, and because of that, I was able to pick one up for you know, very reasonable price. And I was like, for that price, I've got to check it out. Even if I don't keep it, if I just review it for the channel, at least I can sort of share a good deal on a fairly high quality knife with those of you who are watching, because you can get these for, you know, around less than $150 for sure. And I've even seen them go as low as, you know, just over 100, 115, 120, stuff like that. So that's how this knife came to be here on the screen. I saw it for a great deal and I just couldn't resist picking it up to share with you guys and to try out for myself. And I've got to say, pretty impressed. Let's start off with the size and weight. We've already discussed this a little, okay? So this guy is 8 inches right on the nose, 3.5 inch blade, 4.5 inch handle. Now you can see it is full titanium scales, so it's 5.15 ounces. And you know what? That's a little heavy, but I honestly can't complain because, you know, just over 5 ounces is not, to me, unduly heavy, especially for a full titanium frame lock knife. All right, and the other titanium frame locks that I'll show you when we get to the comparison portion are all around that weight anyway. Let's move on now to the blade. Oh, and so, yeah, does this carry well? Yes, it carries very well. Absolutely comfortable to carry. I have no issue with it whatsoever. All right, moving on now to the blade. We have an S35 VN drop point blade with a hollow grind. It is coated, which is the one thing that I'm not in love with. Now, it's a tough coating, heavy duty coating, great. But still, a coated knife is eventually going to show wear. Even if you're careful with it, even if you baby it, eventually you're going to cut something that's, you know, you're going to cut a cardboard box and miss a staple that was left in there, and the staple's going to scratch down the side of your blade, or something's going to happen, okay? As it is right now, you can see the coating is held up really well, but as I say, that's only a matter of time. In terms of cutting performance, well, S35 VN is great steel, and this cuts really well. In fact, when I saw this blade and I kind of got it in hand the first time, I sort of said to myself, you know, this will cut pretty well, I think, but it won't be a great slicer. You know, I probably won't be able to cut apples and stuff like that. It's actually surprised me. There's enough distance here. The height on that hollow grind is enough that even cutting up apples and stuff like that that can be difficult with thicker blade stock, it has done a good job. It does have this fuller here, and you'll sometimes hear people talk about, well, gunk's going to get caught in the fuller. And again, it's not been my experience. As long as the fuller is located where this one is, where it's past the corner of this grind here, then you'll have no problems, all right? And in this case, I do think it adds an aesthetic feature to the knife that is really nice. It sort of, you know, makes it look a little more militaristic, you know, puts me in mind of like the K-bar fighting knife and stuff like that. So I do like the fuller. I think it's a good design choice, and it does make the knife stand out a little bit. I would probably like it more if the blade were in a satin finish, but as it stands, it's still pretty nice looking as far as I'm concerned. And in terms of function, it's very good. I mean, S35 VN is great steel, and this is ground in such a way that it performs really nicely. What about then lockup and deployment? Well, if you've been watching this for the last couple of minutes, you already know it's a titanium frame lock. You can see the over travel stop in there in the lock bar insert. The lock bar tension is pretty comfortable and fairly easy to actuate, although The two complaints I have about this action, it is very smooth, right? You can see that. It flips quite nicely, but there are two issues I have, and that is the detent is a little weaker than I would like, and the lock bar can be a little hard to, I guess not hard, but it's not as easy to access. It would have been nice to have this lock bar just a little bit proud of this show side scale so that I could access it a little more easily. And if you've got like giant fat thumbs, you may have a problem with it. For me, no big issue. I will say this is a knife that, well, now it's not going to do it. I wrecked it. So if I like really gently unlock the lock bar, okay, so right now I've just let the lock bar go, and if I don't really put any pressure on it, I can get a teeny bit of blade play. Very minimal, but it's there. Now, the second I grip the knife or put any kind of pressure on the lock bar, it's quite solid, okay? So it goes away almost immediately. But as a reviewer, it's important to notice that, and I can't tell you if that's just this one or if it's going to be all of them. The other thing is it's so minimal that as that lock wears even a little bit, it's going to go away pretty quickly. So not something I'm overly worried about. But it is there, and it's important to mention that. I would go and watch a couple other videos about this and see if anyone else has experienced that. Otherwise, it's probably just a one-off type of thing. So lockup and deployment. Oh, it is a bearing pivot, by the way, which I guess I should have mentioned initially. So lockup and deployment is quite good. I mean, this knife actuates very easily. It drops shut really nicely. It flips comfortably. And so, you know, all the things that I look for, is it comfortable to use? Does it you know, cause a lot of fatigue to my hands doing it? Am I, you know, feeling uncomfortable? Do I think someone who's not familiar with knives is going to have a hard time unlocking this? The answer to all those questions is no. So action is good, but not amazing. All right, that's how I'm going to say that. Finally, let's take a look at how this thing is built. Titanium frame lock, fairly thick slabs, not milled out in any way. You got a stop pin right there. You got a couple of standoffs over here. It is able to have the clip moved from tip up to tip down, but nothing for left side carry, and it's got a pretty generous lanyard hole. So in terms of how this thing is built and the choices they made, I have no issue with that. I do hate these Kizer screws. I've always hated them, and I wish they would change them. It just looks kind of chintzy to me. So I guess that's the one big issue I have with construction. In terms of ergonomics though, guys, this is pretty nice. It feels very comfortable in hand. The jimping is just right. And that can be a challenge. There's quite a bit of jimping. We've got jimping here, we've got jimping here, jimping up here. And so if this was too sharp, it would really, really wreck this knife. But it's actually quite good. It's just enough to catch, and not enough that if I force my fingers to slide on it, it doesn't hurt or cause any discomfort. And so in terms of grippiness, in terms of confidence in hand, it's very good. And that's one of the things, guys, when I tell you guys that a knife is really grippy, what I mean is I feel confident holding it, that I could do just about whatever I need to do, and I'm not going to be worried about dropping it or slipping up onto the blade or something like that. All right, let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. We'll put this guy up here. I do have another Kizer here. This is visiting from Kerry, and he was kind enough to let me hold on to this for a little bit longer after I reviewed it so that I could compare it to this knife. These are pretty comparable knives, and honestly, if you're not like me, okay, I like a larger knife. If you are a little more open-minded about how big your knife is, this is a phenomenal option, and I would lean toward this. If by the way, if these were exactly the same size, I would be recommending the T1 over the Pinkerton. However, because they're not the same size, all right, and this blade is probably a little better for slicing because it's overall thinner, even though I was very impressed with this, I really, and still am. I'm going to prefer the slightly larger blade and handle. Thinking of larger, let's go ahead and pull a Paramilitary 2 in here just to give you guys a good idea of size comparison. And what else have I got that's kind of can serve that role? Rat Model 1 is a good idea. So there's a Rat 1. Many of you probably have this knife, so that should give you a good sense of size there. And you can see what I mean when I say it's a little smaller. Let's pull out some titanium frame locks. Here is the Riot Torrent. This is one of my favorite titanium frame locks. Absolutely wonderful knife, extremely well made. Certainly in a a category or two above the Pinkerton, but it does serve to, as an example of an extremely well-made, Chinese-made titanium frame lock. Here is a knife that's probably very much comparable, and there are a number of ZTs, guys. The 0560, 0562, which is this, a number of zero tolerances would kind of be in line with this. This just happens to be the one I've got with me right now, and it's a pretty good comparison as well. The detent is a little stiffer on here. The pocket clip, the flipper is more comfortable here. In terms of ergonomics, I do prefer this just slightly because of the way they've done the ramp and the jimping here. So there is the zero tolerance 0562. And of course, if we're talking about titanium frame locks, I think it's helpful to pull in the quintessential hard use titanium frame lock, which would be the Chris Reeve knives in Cosi. I always want to call this knife a Sebenza, even though it is not. And again, you can see this is a knife I really like, and it is just a little bit bigger, and this reflects more my preferences in terms of size. Of course, this is a much more expensive knife. So from that end, in terms of value, guys, and here's the thing, let's bring this knife back in as well. This knife is comparable to these two knives in terms of function, in terms of how well built it is. Maybe it's not exactly there with all the features and stuff like that, but okay, this is like just over $100, or maybe you can even get it for $100. So that does make this knife really stand out here. Among all of the knives I've shown you, I think this one is going to be, in terms of value for dollar, a pretty good option. So what's my overall take on this knife? This is a nice knife. It works well, and in fact, it cuts. When I saw this blade with the fairly thick stock, I thought, that may not cut all that well, but I still want to give it a try because it was such a great price. It cuts really, really nicely, better than anticipated. It carries well, it cuts well, and it's S35VN, so I know there are some budget titanium frame locks out there, like the Ontario Cerberus or the Maxpedition Excelsa, but this is going to be better materials, better fit and finish, better performance overall than either of those for around the same price if you shop around. So for that reason, I think this is a great option. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.